So let's talk about vertigo and what is missing when you go to the doctor and you're still either misdiagnosed or you're not getting better. Okay, there's some things that we see in our clinic. And by the way, my name is Dr. Bulow. I am the director of the Revive Upper Cervical Clinic, and we see vertigo patients all the time. And there's a couple missing pieces and some important information that I go over a lot. And we were talking about it today, so I want to share this with you because if you have vertigo, or you have a close friend or family member or colleague, coworker that's suffering with persistent dizziness, nausea, maybe even some tinnitus or hearing loss. The ears get blamed a lot, and the inner ears and the crystals. But if you've been down that path and it has not worked, then I'm going to tell you why. 99% of the time, why that is. Okay, and we're just going to use this whiteboard here. And you'll have to forgive my drawing. I'm a doctor, not an artist, but I think you'll get the point, okay? So let's look at how our brain perceives balance, because there's a few mechanisms that make that work, okay? So this is our head, right? And this is our neck and our shoulders. And we have our squiggly brain. You know, everybody can remember what the brain looks like from movies and school and all the rest. And by the time our brain gets this perception of vertigo, we're like, ooh, the world is spinning, or maybe the world's stable, but you're spinning in the world. You know, that's sort of like dizziness. But when you feel stable, but the world is spinning around you, that's vertigo, okay? But when you feel that sensation, that's the brain getting a signal from the brain stem. That's the first thing we need to realize, is that our sense of balance, by the time you feel it, okay, by the time you understand and you interpret, I don't feel good, I don't feel stable, that's your brain up here talking. But it gets its information from this area down here, and that area is called the brain stem, okay? It's like, sometimes I describe it as the acorn in the center of the brain. You know how acorns grow into these great big oak trees and they have a root system that goes down deep? Well, the brain stem is like the acorn that forms when you're in development as a baby. And then your beautiful brain up here, the squiggly parts, like I mentioned, that everyone learns about in school, that's like the flower, you know, that's like the tree. And then your nervous system are all these nerves that come out of the base of the brainstem and travel down and communicate with the rest of your body, right? So inside the brainstem is the interpretation center. And there's a lot to take here, but the main thing is that your brainstem utilizes 3 organ systems, 3 channels of communication to decide whether or not you are balanced, right? And then it sends a message up to your brain up here, and you say, I'm balanced, I'm good, you know? But in order for your brain stem, the core, to process and decide whether or not you're balanced, it has to get information from 3 primary systems, okay? Now, primary system number 1, the one that your ENT looks at, and most people are familiar with, is the system of the inner ear apparatus, right? And the semicircular canals. There are these little deep down organs inside of your ear that have fluid. And every time you move your head, that fluid moves. And it sends a message to that brainstem that we just talked about in the center of the brain, right? So these messages come in. So anytime someone has vertigo, the first place doctors tend to look is at the inner ear. Now, if you've had, most people, they have MRIs, right? They have ultrasounds, but the MRIs will look in the inner ear and they're looking for tumors, they're looking for aneurysms, they're looking for things like that. If those MRIs come back negative, then the assumption typically is, aha, there must be these little crystals in the ears, these little crystals, these loose little crystalline structures that are confusing the inner ear apparatus. So then the ENT prescribes vestibular therapy, which is where you go and you move your head in different positions to kind of reposition the crystals. Now, sometimes it is a crystal, and that Epley maneuver, that repositioning maneuver, it works. Honestly, if it worked, you probably still wouldn't be listening at this point. The issue is when it doesn't work, right? What if it is not, the crystals? What's the problem then? Well, let's look at the second system. The second system that sends messages to that brainstem is actually your eyeballs, right? Your eyeballs are sending messages all the time down to the brainstem, telling you where you are. That's why some people can sit in a movie theater and the movie playing could be Star Wars and it looks like, the world is moving around you. And some people that causes vertigo because your eyeballs are saying, oh my gosh, we're moving. But your inner ears are saying, no, we're not moving at all, And then the brainstem gets confused because it doesn't know who to believe. Do I believe the eyeballs? Do I believe the inner ear, So sometimes when people have vertigo, they go to see the eye doctors, the neuro-ophthalmologist, right? And they're going to look at the eyes and they're going to see if there's any strokes in the eyes, any aneurysms, any tumors, just anything bizarre. Again, the MRI will come out. And if the MRI is negative, it's probably not your eyes. But maybe you've been prescribed vision therapy. It's the same thing. If it worked, you probably wouldn't be listening to this by now. So if it's not the inner ear and it's not the eye, what we have to look at is the third system. The third system is called, now I am just going to give an abbreviation, do PROP period, proprioception. It's a big word. Proprioception is the information that your brainstem gets from your body. So your body is constantly sending messages up through the spinal nerves and through the nervous system to the brainstem, telling your brain where your body is in space. It's why someone can close their eyes and touch the tip of their nose with the tip of their finger. This is a proprioceptive test. If you're unbalanced with this, or if you miss your nose, that's one way to tell that your proprioception is off. Or maybe you can't walk in a straight line or stand on one leg without falling over. That's called proprioception. And what gets missed, and this is the punchline here that you have to hear, what gets missed in healthcare is that your neurologist and your ENT tend to look only above the neck. When someone comes in with a vertigo or an imbalance or a dizziness or post-concussion syndrome, they're looking up here. It must be something with the inner ear. It must be a tumor in the brain. It must be something with the eyes. But what we forget about is that your neck is one of the most proprioceptive rich organs in your spine. 80% of the proprioception in your entire spine is housed right here in the upper neck. 80% of the proprioception, right? So your brain's understanding of where you are in space, when you're driving, when you're playing sports, when you're at home and you're eating or you're cooking and you turn and you look to one side and you get dizzy. Part of that is because you can have a problem right here in the upper neck that sends unhealthy information into that vestibular system, that brainstem. It gets just as confused as if you are in a movie theater and your eyeballs are telling you bad information. If you have a spinal problem in the upper neck, it is sending your brain bad information. That's why it's not a coincidence that many people, not all, but many people with these vestibular disorders, Meniere's disease, vertigo, dizziness, tinnitus, just so happen to get pain in the upper part of their neck, or they get headaches. It's not always, but typically those things happen together because they have a cervical problem. And that goes undiagnosed. And that's one of the main reasons why People that have been diagnosed with Meniere's disease or vertigo or POTS, right? These dizziness and vestibular diagnoses very often do not have an end in sight. So people end up trying to go to doctor, and eventually they're told this is a chronic diagnosis. We don't know what the solution is. My solution to you is you need to make sure to have the cervical area looked at. It's called the craniocervical junction. There are craniocervical specialists out there. There are chiropractors, believe it or not, that have specialized degrees in evaluating and treating instability and misalignment of the upper neck, the craniocervical junction. Our clinic is a craniocervical clinic. We're located in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. You can go to our website. We'd be happy to see you. But importantly, and additionally, we have a referral map. If you're not in the Western Pennsylvania region, you can find other craniocervical specialists that are close to home, that are nearby, that can help out. If you have any questions at all in this information, please do not hesitate to contact us. We'd be happy to help. Thanks so much for your time.